Well, I hope people had a good week and weekend. Hope you guys had a productive spring break, or at least a relaxing one. I noticed that people have been turning in some good stuff, and I wanted to talk a little bit about uh, submissions and resubmissions and different things like that. When in this class, there's absolutely no benefit for me if you guys don't get perfect scores. And there's absolutely no reason not to get for everybody to get A's. Because in this class, you have an opportunity to retake quizzes, redo projects, and resubmit things, which many people have taken advantage of, but not everybody. And I want to stress on you that there's no reason not to get perfect scores. If you notice that you have a 51 out of 56 on your quiz, don't settle for it. Go back and see what I wrote about which answers were missed and then go and redo it. I went back and um, I re-uploaded photos for the quiz, and then I also sent everybody a PDF. And you also notice that even if you don't see the images in the quiz and you can't get a hold of the PDF that I emailed everybody, you still have in near each of those spaces the artist and the title of the piece that we're referencing. And if you go to that piece and reference it, write your answer according to that piece, and I grade you wrong, just let me know. Hey, I found this is the image that I found online, and I thought that's what it fit. What if you go to the piece and that artist's name, that's not going to happen. But if it does, and you found it online, then just let me know. Excuse me. But I wanted to let you know that I do have that for everybody. And if you got most of the things right, but there's a couple of things that are wrong, and I told you what those were, go back and take care of it. Retake the quiz. There's no reason not to get perfect scores on that. That's true of projects. That's true of everything else too. If it's written things that you have to redo, work on, sometimes people will get things out of alphabetical order, for example. It doesn't take much to fix that and get a perfect score. And we will watch a couple of videos today of people that did PowerPoint presentations on their artist. One thing that I see that is common for this, the last slide is supposed to have the citations that you use, that you referenced in your annotated bibliography. And if that last slide is missing, or if those are incorrectly shown on that last slide, you won't get all the points, but I don't want you to redo the video. What I do want is to go back and make a document that has those citations in it in correct MLA format in alphabetical order, each with the access by on date at the end, and submit that. And when you resubmit anything, uh, resubmit with, like for this case, resubmit with the video file that you had as well as that document if you need to do that. Or, if you have multiple pictures that you're trying to submit and you just need to resubmit one, resubmit all those original pictures as well, plus that one. That way, because Canvas overwrites each previous submission with the one that you do presently, if you resubmit with the stuff that you need for that assignment, and if you have any questions, you can ask me. That gives us a permanent record that the university will always have of the things that you submitted for this class, and it becomes a protection for you. So please keep that in mind. And if you do resubmit something and I don't regrade it like within a day or so, please email me and just remind me that I need to fix it, and then I'll go back and take care of it. So today we're going to go over a couple of things. One is we're going to look at the foam carvings, the biomorphic uh, abstraction pieces. We're going to watch videos of a couple artist research PowerPoints, plus a peer critique and a self-critique. So you can see an example of those. Those are due on the 10th of April. And I want to remind people about that. If you get them done early, then you do get extra credit for it. I want to show these examples to you. And then after we do that, we're going to talk about this next project that is coming up, the color and tile project. And we'll go through that. So, and I'm thinking what I would like to do is start watching the videos. And once we do the videos, once we watch all the videos, then we'll go through, we'll look at the biomorphic sculptures, and then we'll go on with the rest of it, like from there. So let's see, the two PowerPoints that we have, one is by Ethan, one is by Fifi, and one is James Terrell, and the other one is on Myelin. So I'm going to go ahead and pull one of those up, and we'll watch the whole thing, and then I'll talk about it. Let's do a screen share here. All right. Okay, here we go. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time getting this right at the beginning again. So, oh well. Okay, I think it's close enough. Let's see that.
Who is watching my presentation. I'm Fifi Simon. I'm doing my artist research presentation for Art 1130 on James Turrell. To get started, I'm going to show you this piece called Small Elliptical Glass that he made very recently. You may have even seen this piece in Kendall Jenner's open house AD tour. And this is just to introduce you to the world of light. And that is everything that James Turrell is about. That's what he works in. So here's this piece, and here it is in some different colors. Very beautiful, peaceful, and is meant to be meditative. And we'll get to that. He had a Quaker upbringing. He was born in 1943 in Pasadena, California. And my grandmother used to tell me that as you sat in Quaker silence, you were to go inside to greet the light. And that's what they believe. Art 21, you may know them if you've done an art history class here. It shows him talking about his process of how he views light as a medium that can connect us to something more spiritual or internal. And I absolutely agree with it. It's interesting because his upbringing is so specific, and even as like a Quaker, his upbringing was almost and to bring in this color for him to find resonance with his religion was really cool. He has this quote on his personal website, and he says, "My work is more about your seeing than it is about my seeing, although it is a product of my seeing." So, talking about his background, I'm also interested in the sense of presence of space. That is, space where you feel a presence, almost an entity, that physical feeling and power the space can give. So, in this personal introduction, Terrell explains his philosophy of sensing rather than just seeing, emphasizing that his work isn't about the object, but it's about the light itself. It's very non objective. And even just the act of seeing the light is the art that he's trying to create. He talks about how he wants to create a space where the light has a physical presence that feels almost like it's touching you. And I absolutely love how he describes light as something that occupies space rather than just illuminating it. It resonates with me because it's minimalistic, which is a value I hold highly, and I think hold even more highly now that I've seen a lot of his work and have studied it. Now, Sky Spaces, if you're watching this, I highly encourage you to look up James Turrell Sky Spaces after this because he's done so many and they're absolutely stunning. So the Gagosian profile provides a really professional review of his career, specifically focusing on the sky spaces and his massive road and crater project, which isn't this one but is very similar. It explains how he uses architecture to frame the sky, which is so lovely, essentially turning the heavens into a flat canvas of color for the viewer. As you can see, the blue at the top of this temple it looks flat. It just looks like a color and maybe just a light source, but it's the sky. It's literally a hole in the ceiling. And this place. He's even made churches for his religion, for Quakers to come and meditate as well. And I think it's great seeing it in Beijing as well, making its way around the world and influencing people around the world is a new way to meditate and to take in nature through light. His background in psychology and mathematics definitely explain why his work feels so intentional and structured, even to a point of scientific minimalism. Okay, his permanent installation in the Guggenheim Museum since 1980, this is what he said about it. Well, I'm known as a light artist, but rather than be someone who depicted light or painted light in some way, I wanted to have the work be light. A lot of this is the idea of seeing yourself see, understanding how we perceive. And the piece you see behind is a room that you can walk into, and the walls are situated so that you can sit down and lean against the wall, and it allows you to comfortably look up into the piece above you. This video source that I watched on the Guggenheim Museum gave me a much better visual sense of how his installations look in real time, showing how the colors shift and change as you move through them, like so. Yellow to green to blue and to purple. It covers some of his early experiments with light projections and how he learned to manipulate our brains to perceive depth. It almost flattens it, even though the structure itself is incredibly tall. So seeing it in person would be very tricky on the eyes. If you were standing directly below it, you'd probably see very flat ovals just laid on top of each other. But if you were standing from the side, you might see the depth that is in it. Okay, so the light inside this piece. This is a permanent installation in Houston, and the Museum of Fine Arts did a segment on this. This is a literal tunnel of light that people walk through. The documentation explains how the light creates a sense of weightlessness and how the colors are designed to make the walls seem to disappear. The specific purpose of the piece is for the viewer to be immersed in the destination and the journey at the same time. It's a perfect example of his corner shallow space, which messes with your depth, but you can't as well walk around it. And also the wedge work, which very flat, but it gives you this depth, and it's a great way to see a concept in a public and accessible way instead of a very flat way. So this work particularly resonated with me because it's so interactive, and the message about the journey and the destination, you aren't just looking at it, you're in it, living it, in and out of the tunnel. It's so different from the 2D art that I usually focus on making and that we tend to make, but it makes me wonder how I can make my own work feel more like a physical space for people to inhabit. Here are my citations and another small look at the elliptical glass piece, and I hope you liked it. Thank you.
This was a really good example um, of the research PowerPoint. I like this because Fifi, it was very um, particular, very in depth, and I like this too. Mike going quiet sometimes. You heard that every once in a while. This is kind of fun to me because Fifi was able to share some of James Turrell's background and then walk through and talk about examples of his art. One thing that I really appreciated is that there were a couple times where Fifi had several different photos of the same thing in sequence. You could see the color changing through, and that was very interesting to me. And at the end, showing the citations, I thought they did a great job on that too. Right here. So we see all the citations, and they look like they're all in alphabetical order, which is amazing. And each one has the accessed on date, which is excellent. That's perfect. So nicely done. This was a great example. Oh, Anna, I'm glad you're here. Didn't realize that you had joined. I'm just sharing the PowerPoints that people have turned in, and then I'm going to share examples of the self and peer critique videos as well in just a moment, as soon as we get to that. What I'm appreciating too is that you guys are being really consistent about the time. I said between 5 and 7 minutes, and you guys are doing a great job with that. The reason why that's important is I'm pretty sure I told you guys. I mean, if I didn't, I'm sorry, but uh, a couple years ago, somebody did one of these. They were so excited about it that they ended up doing their project was like 35 minutes long. That's how long their presentation was. And that is just way too much time to put into this thing. Um, I think that 5 to 7 minutes is going to be perfect. So, all right. So here's Myelin by Ethan.
This presentation is on the artist Maya Lin. She's a sculptor, architect, and landscape artist, best known for her work in relationship to nature and how she's able to create an emotional connection through the area that she is trying to build on. This presentation highlights some of Maya's unique artistic approaches and how she uses them in her designs. So let's jump right in. Maya likes to have her pieces connect to the land and help form the story she's trying to tell. This piece was created to honor a part of history where Native American tribes would come to fish, trade, and interact together. By creating separate areas, Maya forces the viewer to walk around the same land the story is being told in. She also avoids taking away from the original landscape by creating a piece that doesn't disrupt it and by being subtle with her choice in art forms. Each circle shares a story or information pertaining to the era written on the walls of the circles, yet again forcing the viewer to move around and interact with the landscape. The most famous piece of work from Maya is her Vietnam Memorial. It was created back in 1982 to commemorate the people who lost their lives in the war. When she first surveyed the area, she knew that she wanted the piece to feel like it was lifted out of the ground, which she took and built on by creating the design, splitting the park in 2 levels, showcasing the names of all of the people who lost their lives in a way that she likes to call opening up a geode. To help tell the story, she engraved the names on a polished piece of granite, causing a reflection of the viewer's face to cast over the names they were reading. This struck a lot of family members at the time to build a personal connection for them. At the center were the start and end dates of the war, symbolizing the cause of all of this. So you can see how she kind of works with the landscape she is building the memorial in and being able to use that to her advantage to tell her story. Representing nature is one of her strongest suits, and one of her strengths in that is being able to take the natural forms out of actual nature and being able to use that inside artworks. Using the natural order of things, Maya simplifies this river into just the river's shape and then casting it in a silver coating, connecting it to the river's nickname, Silver Running. This comes from the amount of fish in the water back then when they gave it that name, causing shimmers in the water as they swam. This piece stands out because of the placement of the piece. She could have probably just done it on a table, not as interactive, but she took it, filled a wall for it, letting people walk up and down the piece and seeing each little intricate detail of the river. She also said that this was in connection to veins and how, just like rivers, the veins in our body are connected to us and helping form that personal connection. Getting a lay of the land. Maya says that she focuses on unusual places and this helps her build ideas from her original idea. Personally, I think this is something I can draw from because most of the time trying to find that perfect scenario for your design is the hardest part. But letting the artwork be guided by those restrictions can help tell the story on its own. This landscape design was built to add a center for people at Princeton University to come together. She saw that people were cutting across this little park and wanted to create a natural way of community, and it was used by a lot of people to come and sit on, as well as creating a subtle design at the end of it, connecting it to the actual story she was trying to tell. And then that brings us on to our next point, which is emphasizing a story. This piece has a poem written around the rim of the outside circle. It was commissioned by a health center because most of the viewers coming in and leaving were having illnesses, either terminal or just short term. And so they were kind of in a place where they needed some calming and some hopefulness. The poem on the outside is a poem about hope, and being able to create that focal point, which is the outside of the circle, was crucial to bringing this piece together. So by having this area that you just naturally are drawn to and has a peaceful feeling to it, she was able to find the one area that people would most likely talk in, like the picture shows with the two people, and then create a center point for the story to be told. This piece was created in collaboration with her brother, who is a poet. They wanted to create an area that people would walk through, and the actual poems would be engraved into the actual artwork. The back and forth between her brother and her while creating this was pretty interesting. They would come to the area, he would form an idea of which poem he would want to write, and then she would take that information and the area and then create the artwork from it. This made a nice balance on how the pieces were viewed by the viewer, as well as how the emotions behind what they were reading was reinforced by the actual look of the landscape. So some of the most key takeaways from this, and what I get the most from Maya and her creative form, is not to just create something to be art, but by focusing on how everything around it can also help tell you that story that you're trying to form from the art. Finding a small piece of the story that you're trying to tell and then weaving that into the overall experience, I think is something Maya does really well, as well as using nature to extend her artwork and its reach of people and grabbing onto their emotions. That is all today I have for Maya. Thank you very much for listening.
There we go. I really like that. I thought that was well done. The only thing missing is the last slide should have the citations on it. But like I mentioned before, this person can resolve that issue not by redoing the video, but by resubmitting the video file plus the just a document that has those citations correctly cited, alphabetical order, and each with the accessed on date. I really like this. One thing that I really appreciate that Ethan did is you're talking about different aspects of Maya art, and each one, like this is three different shots talking about one specific thing, and then these other ones are talking about a series and showing examples from the series, talking about what the series means, or um, the different kinds of things done in a specific area and why each of those things is important to that area, or going in depth to on a specific piece again. And I enjoyed that because it felt like this one I was understanding what the entire project was about as Ethan described it. So I thought that this was really well done and helped me appreciate Maya Lin's art. So another really good example of this kind of thing. So nicely done. Now, something else that we need to talk about is And I'm going to do a screen share and show this to you. So I'm really enjoying what you guys are doing. The PowerPoint videos, I think you guys are doing a great job. So keep it up. Okay, we talked about applying the tools of artistic critique. A lot of people have turned in their card biomorphic abstractions. I'm sorry, I have not finished grading those. I've graded every other assignment except for these and one or other, I think. I'm going to try to get all those done by this weekend so everybody knows right where they stand, and you have plenty of you have at least a month before the end of the semester to rework anything. But you notice that in this card biomorphic abstraction, right down here is a discussion, and I wanted to click on that and share this with you. We have a lot of these that have been turned in, but not a lot of people have done this. The discussion is you turn in your object, you turn in a photo of your object, and then you find three other students and post this on them. And it is directly related to the tools of artistic critique. That is, making a 40-word comment that is specific about it, referencing the tools of artistic critique, which are describe, analyze, interpret, and evaluate. And in that 40 words, first part, you're going to be referencing how they involve the viewer. Second part, you're going to be talking about how they developed interesting, engaging shapes. And the third part, you're going to be writing about how they followed principles we discussed regarding biomorphic abstraction. Each of these is going to be maybe 2 sentences, 12 to 15 words. Remember, critique does not mean criticize. And look at the tools of artistic critique. And again, the tools of artistic critique, if we are going to share this, right here you can see there's attendance, Module 1, Module 7.A, and then applying the tools of artistic critique. And that is where we talk about it. Look at specifically at the tools of artistic critique right here and referencing those. To get full points for this discussion, what you're going to need to do is make those comments for each of 3 other students after you post your own images. And so that's 40 words addressing these 3 points on each of 3 fellow students. Once you do that, then you'll get the points. So make sure that you do that. So that's what I wanted to say about that. Now, as we look at as we go back up and look at this module, the applying the tools of artistic critique, you'll see that you learn about the tools of artistic critique. There's the quiz that hopefully everybody's taken. This takes you to a playlist that has different critiques from earlier classes. And then this right here, this assignment is you do a 3 to 5 minute critique on one of your own items. And on this assignment, you pick somebody from a piece of art from the class that you've seen and do a 3 to 5 minute critique of somebody else's work, just one other work. So one of your own pieces and somebody else's. It has to be from somebody in this class made during this semester. What is important about well, there's a couple things. One, it has to be 3 to 5 minutes long, but another really big thing is that it needs to follow use the tools of artistic critique. Again, description, analysis, interpretation, and evaluation. So I want to share with you an example of this. Notice that this is due on April 10th. I've changed the due date on that. If you get it done early, you do get extra credit. So what I want to do is share with you, we're going to do a peer critique first, and then we're going to watch a self-critique. So here's the peer critique. And this person is not in our class. They are in a different class. But I want you to pay attention to what they're doing in this critique, and listen for as they talk about stuff and move from tool to tool through the critique process, which again is describe, analyze, interpret, and evaluate.
Artistic peer critique on Cami Mitchell's sculpture-based photography, and it's on their unexpected location photograph. If I could describe this, I would say that this is what I see is a Latin American inspired house submerged in nature. The house is painted yellow, and the paint appears to be spotty and a little rustic, as if to indicate the wear and tear it has endured over the years. It has a traditional clay roof that comes in rows. The house has an overgrown flower growing from different angles of the house. The door is a bright blue color, which also appears to be made out of clay. As the title indicates, the building is an unexpected location, which is surrounded by wooden logs, rocks, and weeds. The medium appears to be made out of cardboard, wooden sticks, clay, and colored paper. The first thing I noticed about this piece is that the color palette used on the building, it has bright yellow walls that contrast with the blue door, but this color combo also complements each other nicely, as well as the pink flowers and the orange roof. All these colors are strong individually, but they also don't overpower each other. They encapsulate the vibe of the house perfectly, which is that it's like a foreign style house. For my analysis, I would say that there's a pattern in repetition seen through the clay roof, which consists of curved rows that flow down in the same direction. This created a rhythm for the viewer's eyes to look back down to the rest of the piece. There's also movement seen through the angle at which the photograph is positioned. The weeds spread out from the house towards the audience, but they also pull us back in simultaneously. Unity can be seen when you look at the curved logs and then you looked at the curved clay roof. They both face the same direction and resemble each other in shape and color. I definitely think that the mood of this piece is achieved by the artist's choice to surround the house with plants. When I think of houses like these in real life, they're usually in countries that are tropical or surrounded by nature. And for my interpretation, I would say that I think the artwork is more conceptual because it appears that the artist is trying to indicate that the house is in an isolated environment, kind of like a ghost town where there isn't a huge population. The house is somewhat old with chipped paint on the walls, and that's perhaps because it sorry and that's probably because it's abandoned due to the subtle hints that we get, like the barred off windows, the overgrown flowers, and the overgrown weeds, which make it appear impossible to get towards the entrance, making the house appear inaccessible to the audience. And my valuation is my thoughts and feelings about the work have changed from my first impression. I initially thought that this piece was fun and colorful to look at, maybe a bit busy, which is what appealed to me about it. But then I realized how lonely the house appears, and I took the minor things into account, like how there aren't other colorful houses or things around it. Everything else seems to have natural colors since the background is nature. Noticing small details like this made all the difference. I think the image communicates the feeling of being small in a big, untamed world. The house looks so small and somewhat pathetic compared to the big logs that are next to it and the overgrown weeds that might engulf the house too. There's only so much that we can control in this world, like our own creations. Some are buildings. But regardless, everything else has a mind of its own and will change, whether you like it or not. I think the piece is overall strong. It has a good use of harmony, balance, repetition, color, texture, and scale.
I thought this was really well done. I think that some of the things that I like about it is that it was easy to tell when Michelle went from one tool of artistic critique to the next. They said to describe it, they said to analyze it, they said to interpret it. I thought that was helpful. Another thing I really appreciate is precision. Michelle was very precise, and the things that they pointed out, the reference points, how they talk about what's going on in here, how they, the justifications for the interpretation were tied to specific things that they had talked about and described. And I thought that was really good. I like that kind of precision because even if other people don't agree with your interpretation, you can defend it, and it sounds like you really thought about it, which you did when you use this kind of linguistic precision. So I really appreciate that. I wanted to stress too that for this, this was Michelle's voice, but it doesn't have to be your voice. When you do this, you can write it out and have a roommate or family member or a friend read this for you. It doesn't have to be your voice. And notice that they didn't do, they didn't do a um, graphic frame around the picture or anything like that. This is just a recording of the screenshot of their computer with this image. And that is perfectly fine. This is great because we're not critiquing all this stuff around the image. We're just critiquing what's inside the image. So I think they did a great job on this. So, and this is the self-critique. All righty.
My sculpture-based photography. If I could describe this house, I would say that this house is boxy, and this is further represented through the squares and the rectangles seen in this piece. It contains two different materials, one of which is thin and appears fragile, and it is used on the windows. The other material is a cardboard used to create the building. It's somewhat thick and holds up well. There's unity in the piece through the repeated use of the brown and black cardboard in the piece, and through the use of squared shapes. Variety is seen through the use of pine cones in the background. It complements the colors used in the piece and indicates that the setting is in nature. There are patterns and repetition through the designs placed on the window shutters of the house. They all have horizontal lines that are framed by a rectangle that give the illusion that they're realistic windows. The choice of materials used makes the piece appear grungy and wood-like. Through the texture and colors seen on it, the design of the house is overall simple and clean. My perspective on this piece is that it's a realistic house that was probably not going for a design that was too complex, but the illusion of it being a life-sized house is altered through the pine cones surrounding it. You kind of can't help but compare the size of the pine cones to the house. The pine cones would complement the house better if they were a lot smaller. There's a symbol at the top of the house, like at the top of some architectures. I can't really interpret it since the picture isn't focused on that area. The camera is more focused on the open door, which in a way invites the audience. Through the open door, you can see a bit of the inside of the empty house. I think the artist was somewhat basing this design on a suburban house, since most houses in Utah have this simple and cookie cutter appearance. Maybe they were basing it on a house that they previously lived in, or the houses that possibly surround them. And my thoughts and feelings about this piece were initially that it was a simple house that had cohesive colors surrounding it. which gave it a natural cabin-like vibe. But because I questioned the intention behind this piece, I interpret it differently. Like the fact that this piece is a house, and you usually see houses upright, but in the picture you see it placed on the ground, and it is photographed at an angle where you don't see the entirety of it, but you can see enough that your mind can imagine the entirety of the house. The repetition and rhythm are continuously seen throughout this piece through the window shutters and the shape of the windows. You also see it on the sides of the house and somewhat in the back of the house through the other windows. This makes the piece appear balanced despite being at a weird angle and positioning. I think the piece communicates the idea that there's more to the story than expected. The lingering open door is the main thing in focus in the picture, and by default, it contrasts with everything else in the piece. The door faces a different direction than the rest of the house, which sort of acts like a leading line towards the entrance. This makes the audience want to investigate what lies inside the house.
Okay, that was another really good example, I think. Um, some of the things I liked about it again is that Michelle went through and described each tool that was being used: description, analysis, interpretation, and evaluation. And I like that. And they pointed out some things about the different design features of the house, the surroundings, like the size of the pine cones and things like that. One thing, when you do your own self-critique, it is very hard to separate yourself from the work that you spent hours creating. And I think that Michelle did a good job illustrating this too. You need to do this best. You need to divorce yourself from the fact that you made the house. Pretend as hard as you can that this is the first time you've ever seen this thing. Well, I'm sorry, not the house, but whatever work you are critiquing that's your own. Pretend that this is the first time you're encountering it and view it as best you can through that lens. And what's interesting is that you'll find out that you did a better job than you expected. Because as artists, we're not judging the thing itself, we're judging ourselves based on what we learned while we were making it and what we would go back and change. And by stepping away from the fact that we made it, I think you'll be able to actually enjoy the object itself better. So I thought Michelle did a really good job of this. Both of them came in this was almost 4 minutes. The other one was just a hair over 5 minutes. And the target we're looking at is 3 to 5 minutes. So Anna, do you have a working microphone?
I do.
Right. And it looks like you asked a question, should this presentation focus mainly on the artist's artworks? I'm sorry, I did not see that earlier.
Oh, it's okay.
Uh, One of the things we don't want to do with the artist presentation is turn it into a biography. We don't want to do that. And so I thought some of the best ones that we've seen are people that will tell a little bit about the person's story, but they're primarily focusing on the artwork, how they're responding to it, and then what drove that artist to build that artwork. Why is Maya Lin making this kind of thing? What's the background setup and all that kind of thing? Why did James Turrell turn to light, and how does that tie in with his background? I I I think that is the most successful because if you just do a straight timeline and just read off from, they did this in this year, they did this in this year, that isn't really as interesting as sharing what you learn about learning on that artist. What about their work do you really like? Uh, why did Ai Weiwei make 4 million sunflower seeds out of ceramic? What's going on? That is so much more interesting, I think, than spending the 5 to 7 minute presentation talking about their preference in shirt colors. you know Th-
Yeah.
but does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Okay, good. And what did you think about the peer and self-critique? that I just shared with you.
I thought those were really helpful. I liked them.
It's
And
really good. Sorry.
I liked that you said we should kind of pretend like it's the first time we've seen our own artwork that we critique.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important. One of the things that we do all the time is just be way too hard on ourselves when we shouldn't be. And you guys don't give yourself enough credit for the kind of the quality of work that you do. And what I've seen is that even though it's really going to be difficult to give yourself credit for the work that you do, if you can pretend that this is the first time seeing it, it makes it easier. And I've had people actually say that they were embarrassed about the thing afterwards, but they after they made it, but when they did that self-critique, it made them realize I actually did a pretty good job. And I want people to have that kind of experience because you're spending a lot of time on this education thing and you spend a lot of time on the work that you put out. You should respect the work that you do. I think, even if it's only something that you learn from and then have to throw away later, that's fine as long as you respect the fact that you actually did it. And I think that's what's important. But it also makes it so that I have had a student who did one of these self critiques. My phone is talking to me. Um, I have had a student who. No, thank you. I have had a student before who um, go way the other way and talk about how amazing they are, and nobody wants to listen to that. That is just way more than anybody needs to endure. So, but I do feel that you guys need to recognize your own effort. So, and I wanted to mention too, if you go back up to module 7.A, there are still about 3 or 4 people that have not declared artist research or service learning. The moment you declare that, if you're going to do artist research, I go through and remove all these other uh, assignments from your queue so you don't have to worry about it. So there's still a couple of people, it's halfway through the semester, they haven't done that, and they need to do that, declare. I think in this class, we haven't had anybody do service learning. In the other class, the other section that I teach, I've had a couple people declare service learning. One of them used their skills in design and layout to generate a book for the family that one of the matriarch of the family, uh, this book has stories from everybody in the family and their interactions with her, what they remember growing up with her, and different things like that. And this person assembled the book, did the layout, did all that kind of stuff, and then got the book published for their family. And I thought that was a pretty cool service project. And then another person um, found out about an assisted living facility for people with memory uh, issues. And some people were really able-bodied, others not so much. And so they did kind of a Bob Ross style um, class where they all did watercolors under her direction according to the skill levels that they had, and where they were. And she said that one of the people who was no longer mobile at all, they could not move their hands or anything, hadn't, and what she did is had them communicate where they wanted to put which colors. And she took photos of all the paintings after they were done. But that kind of stuff is really fun. And there's never two service projects that look the same.
Yeah.
So that's
Dang,
if people, what's that?
that made me realize I'd actually been asked to teach a couple different art projects. I didn't realize that might have worked for service learning.
Yeah, and if you want, it is kind of late in the semester. There's only about 7 weeks left, I think. if that is something that you want to do and you haven't done it yet, we could probably figure out a way to get it to work. And unless you've already put in all the time for the research. But whoever's
Oh,
interested in that, let me know. Reach out to me. But
what's
this,
left for
that,
what's left for the research? Is it just the the reflection paper and the
let's see there.
presentation?
There's the PowerPoint presentation, and then there's the final thoughts, the 5 paragraph. Um,
Oh,
yeah. So if you've done the presentation already, don't switch. If you haven't gotten there and you haven't quite done the annotated bibliography yet, then you could probably switch. But if you've already done that, I would not switch. I just finish it out. But that there are you don't need a class to justify service learning. If you guys are interested in that, you could go to the community engagement office for the school and talk to them. I bet I'd be willing to bet that there might be a way that one of your future classes you could use a service learning component. That'd be something to look
yeah.
into if you are graduating next year. So definitely check that out. But that's some cool ideas.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Now, I'm sharing this screen. We talked about going back and doing the discussion, talking about 3 other students. And I'm showing this screen too because I want people to remember that those 2 critique videos that I just showed you, only 3 to 5 minutes long. One of them is you find somebody else's work to critique. That's why we have the discussion board so you guys can, upload those look at those images that other students have uploaded. When you do somebody else's work, critique somebody else's work, it has to be a student in this class who built it this semester. And doing your own work, it can be anything you've made for this class throughout the semester. And if you do this before the end of March, you do get extra credit. So I wanted to remind people of that. Now, I know that not everybody has done their biomorphic abstraction yet. And so I wanted to show examples from the other section of the class so that you guys can kind of get a feel for what other people are doing and we can talk about some of these principles that we've talked about before. So I'm going to stop sharing this page and I'm going to share this image. Hopefully, there we go. I'm going to go through these rather quickly. And Anna, if you have any questions, please pause me and let me know. Now this, I am kind of liking this shape. What they've done a good job is they've done a good job sanding this down so you don't see a lot of tool marks. There's a little bit right here. But one of the things we've talked about last week was this really needs to not be just a silhouette. This looks like it's just a silhouette. And by that I mean there's not an awful lot of dimensionality front and back. All we see is the dimensionality around the edges. And for this, what I would recommend in bringing it into more of a three-dimensional aspect is maybe scooping out this area on the left-hand side or even in the middle so that this rim on the very left-hand edge is where it is. But if you scoop out this part that's closer to the middle and sand that down, it starts giving this thing the illusion that it's curving towards you. And if you do the same thing and scoop out right around here on the far side, it makes this part look like it's scooping away and it gives that illusion of a curving movement towards you and away from you on this piece. And that makes it so much more interesting. Doing things like sanding, like on the right-hand side, we have a hole, sanding that so that the transition from the surface into the hole is a little bit smoother will be kind of cool. Or adding another dimension where maybe you cut down a little bit on this just to the left of the hole and then start sanding that down even more so that it looks like all this shape almost starts draining into the hole. And what I'm talking about specifically is adding organic dimension to the front and the back side instead of just around the perimeter. Anna, does that make sense? Okay, good. Anna says, yes, it does. All right. Now here we run into a very similar problem where the shape itself is really cool, but you can see, I think that, and also photographing this was not really successful because we have that hard line in the background, and I'd say, make your own infinity screen, stuff like that. But the shape itself, I like. It's kind of irregular. It's kind of organic. Has a really kind of interesting take on the heart kind of expectation. Some of the things that are a little bit detracting is the sanding isn't very smooth. And maybe you just have a heavy grit sandpaper and it's not doing a good job. It's pulling off a lot. If that's the problem and I make a comment about it, let me know. And that's something to pay attention to and fix when you start doing plaster or the paper mache. However, some of the things that kind of detract as well, aside from the tool marks, is all we see is this silhouette and this hole right there. They've done a little bit of manipulating on the front surface so you don't see the initial or the starting flat surfaces of the block, but there's no attention paid really other than the primary silhouette and that hole. For this, what I would recommend is sanding the edge of the hole and making it a lot more gradual and smooth so it feels like it bellies out and it's round. Maybe scooping out these one of these on this, like on the right hand side, scoop out that right hand side petal on the front, and on the left, scoop out that left hand side petal on the back. That way, it would feel like this one on the left is going away, and this one on the right, the outside petal is turning towards us. And emphasize that as you smooth as they you smooth out the lip of the hole going through. And it doesn't have to be equally smooth all the way around, but we want it to feel like it's flowing instead of looking like it was cut out by a cookie cutter. So does that make sense on this one? Okay, good. Excellent. Now I think that this one is just an absolutely beautiful shape. You see that there is absolutely none of that original surface of the block. We have some really interesting holes, and we have a fantastic organic shape. On this, the only thing that detracts is we can still really see the tool marks, like where my mouse is right up here and right through there on the right-hand side upper part, this edge right here. But what I want you to look at is see how instead of just cutting this out like a cookie, they they carved it going around the object, not just from the front. And you can see it feels almost like a weird hip kind of bone or some sort of odd double cave entrance. But you can see like right here on the lower left-hand side, this nodule comes towards us. And then as we follow it along the left, it goes away. It kind of comes down to a narrow waist. It widens up again as it comes towards us. It starts towards us on the upper left and it is going. The middle part going down kind of goes away. It scoops away. And on the right, as on the top, it scoops away as well. And we have this odd um, kind of outside edge where on the lower left it's almost flat, and on the left, I mean, so on the lower right it's almost flat, and in the middle on the right hand side you have that outside edge that's scraped in a little bit, so it feels like it's diagonal. So there's a lot of movement going on with this, and it feels like the left hand side, that nodule is twisting away from us. And the only thing that I think this person should work on is sanding this a little bit more so that we get rid of those tool marks. The tool marks like on the middle of the right-hand edge on the lower left. Can you see those tool marks and what I'm talking about, Anna?
I think so.
Can
I'm
you
not
see my
totally
mouse?
sure.
Can you see where my mouse is on this?
Yeah.
Okay. here's a tool mark right here that I'm pointing at, and you can see where you have a sudden change of texture. Here it looks up on the top left. You see where the file kind of scraped away. On the right, on the top, we have where the file kind of scooped underneath a little bit. And in the middle on the right-hand side, you see where the file went in to make that kind of uh, chiseled inlet right there. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Does that make sense?
I think it's harder for me to see because I'm looking at it on my phone, but
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay. All right. And on this one that looks like a hip, I think that the only thing they need to work on is just sanding it down so it's smoother. And I think that that will go a long way in resolving some of these issues. But yeah, when you get a chance, blow this up so that you don't see it on the phone, you know, like on your computer screen, or blow it up while it's in the phone, and you'll be able to see those chisel and tool marks a little bit better. Now this one, I love this shape. I think this is really wonderful. It looks like the foam is kind of folded a little bit, and the creases are from folds. On this one, I do think it does need to be sanded a little bit more. Like in this diagonal line towards the bottom, it needs to be sanded. Maybe on the right-hand side, these need to be sanded so they feel more rounded. But I think, and one of the things you'll notice, I'm going to blow this up, on the left-hand edge here, these kind of divots do not come from your file that you have in your kit. They come because the sanding has a tendency to pull away some of the foam. And if that's the case, you've done what you can and you're afraid of losing the integrity of the piece, just let me know. If I dock you any points, just say, hey, the sandpaper just took the foam out, and we can fill that up with paper mache. But what I am concerned, if we blow this up, right through here we have tool marks right there. We have tool marks around the neck of this. Those are the areas that we need to work on sanding. We're going to go back and I'm going to blow this up. Okay, Anna, can you see the tool mark right through here? It makes it easier? Does that make it easier to see?
I think so.
Okay.
It all still looks pretty similar to me, but hmm,
Like right through here, we see that like this line that I'm
yeah.
tracing, that right there is from the edge of a file. This line parallel to it is also from the edge of the file. Those are the kinds of things we want to try to sand down. If we blow up this area here, this very strong line right there that you can see, that is from the edge of the file. And that's the kind of stuff we want to get rid of. Is that making sense?
Yeah, I get it now.
Okay. Now this one, this one I think is just beautifully done because we have a very organic form. Now notice that in some of these areas there is foam missing that was pulled out because of the sandpaper, but they sanded it enough that we don't see any tool marks. It looks pretty smooth. And I love this kind of flowing organic form. I think that they did just a great job smoothing it so it gently goes from one shape to another. So I think this is perfect and it's ready to go. This one I think is pretty good too. That has that same kind of smooth quality. It's very organic looking, but I blew it up a little bit because it still feels pretty flat. And what I would suggest for this person is maybe right up here where my mouse is, sand that down so it scoops back a little bit. Maybe sand around this form a little bit so that it feels more like a ball. Maybe sand this part right here so it feels more cylindrical. Maybe sand this out right through here a little bit so it maybe scoops down a bit. You know, scoop that down a little bit and then smooth it out and see what happens. But this one is really pretty good. That's not too bad. So I'm hoping that that helps. And when you guys see comments that I make on these things, do what you can to fix them. Next project that we're going to work on is the color and texture tiles, and after that we're going to do paper mache. So don't jump the gun. We're going to do color and texture tiles first, and then we're going to do paper mache. And so you do have time to fix that and work on it a little bit. Any questions from what we were looking at, Anna?
Not that I can think of, but I did have a question um about the art show. I don't know if that should wait till a bit later.
What art show are you talking about?
The student art show.
Oh, okay. I don't know anything about that other than I would you should have emails from the Woodbury Museum. You know, if you submitted something or whatever, they should be
Mhm.
communicating with you. And if they haven't, I would just either call them or email them.
Okay. Um,
What was your specific question?
so my artwork got accepted. Yay.
Excellent.
But I don't know where to drop it off.
Okay, what I would do is call over to the Woodbury as soon as you can, like tomorrow morning, and just talk to anybody there and just say, "Hey, I missed the email where they told me to drop where to drop off my artwork. Could you tell me where and when I can do that?" And then they should tell you. And that's something that I would, if you haven't gotten the email, they may have either lost the email or transcribed it wrong or something like that. And that is definitely something that I would call over about. And you
Hmm.
can just look up Woodbury, look up their on their website, and just call the number that they have in the office there.
Okay.
That that'd be the first thing I'd do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, and but that does give me a wonderful lead in. I don't know if anybody's going to be on campus this Saturday, but in the Fulton Library, we are doing this year's folklore symposium. I'm going to be giving a presentation between 1:30 and 3 o'clock, I believe, that is on dragons and how they're a symbol in, cultures from every continent on the planet of the three world cosmology and relating it to physics and hospital design. So if you guys are interested, that is this coming Saturday, just a couple days away. So I don't know if they're going to offer refreshments. That's what I always lobby for because that's the only reason I want to show up for these things. But anyway,
Do you know what time it is again?
oh, let's see. I do know what time it is, and I'll send an email out that's the schedule, and
Okay.
I'm looking it up right now. 1:30 to 3 o'clock is when I'm not going to be doing it the whole time. I'm supposed to have about an hour. And so I'm going to I'm probably going to be presenting at about 2 o'clock, 2 to 3. So I don't know exactly, but that's about when it's going to be. So this Saturday afternoon. So if you guys are
All
on
right.
campus, I'm going to be there. Come up, introduce yourself to me, and it'll just be fun to see people there. Okay, now this is the next module, and by the way, uh, extra brownie points to Anna for giving me an opening to talk about that. Right now this is the next module. Um, Anna, did you see last week's class?
I have not yet. I was
Okay,
going to watch it tonight.
okay, good. Because in that I talk about Plato's allegory of the cave, and that's going to be important. That's something that I'm going to touch on a couple times. That's going to be the next project one is contemporary processes, where we talk about conceptual art. And Plato's allegory of the cave is really important to that because that allegory kind of walks through a little bit about uh, the kind of work we do as artists. Um, for example, in this class, all the modules we've been working on, we're working with physical tools and we're working with materials to create a piece that is the artwork. How that shifts a little bit is an artist who does conceptual work, they are using that finished artwork as the tool to sculpt imaginations. And that's where the term conceptual comes in. The artwork is designed specifically just to get you to think, not to tell you what to think, but to open the door for thinking along lines that the artist kind of directs or points out. So that's going to be important later on, and we'll talk about more about that later on. Now, one of the in a sculpture class, we don't really talk about texture and light a lot of the times, and I want to bring up something that a lot of the times we don't really think about. When we think of classical sculpture, we think of it like this, with as just bare rock. And what that was really emphasized during the Renaissance, because the sculptures that people had from Greek and Roman antiquity during the Renaissance were all this white marble. That's what we see, and there's a couple reasons for that. One is when they stand outside over centuries, whatever was on there originally is going to be scraped off or rubbed off just because of the process of living around them. But also in the Renaissance, starting about uh, after people got back from the Crusades and families started building, consolidating wealth in villas and things like that, and they really fell in love with this about 1350. They really fell in love with Greek and Roman sculptures, in Italy and the areas around there. And workers would find these, they would dig them up, and then deliver them to the families that wanted them. And but if you can imagine, this is how some of them might have looked a little bit, but after a couple hundred years, a lot of this paint is only going to be surviving in patches. Or it might even be worse than that. If it's buried, if it's under mud, maybe the paint bubbled out quite a bit and just looked really disgusting. So the workmen that found these, that harvested them from under the ground, would scrape off all the paint and use brushes to brush the paint off so that you just have the marble stone. So it would look like this on the left. And because they thought it was gross having the patches of color. But people that bought these, they had no idea. And so very quickly, it was believed that the Greeks and Romans did this. Anna, are you surprised that this is how some of these sculptures actually looked with the paint on it?
Um, I've actually seen a couple of these in my art history class that I'm taking, but yeah, I had no idea that they were colored before.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that your art history class is showing you what they actually used to look like. But it was bad. None of these people that had access to them had any idea of what the actual history was. And it got so bad that there were art historians and art critics that were even talking about that the purest sculptor only worked in the purest of white marble. And this idea that white was more
Huh.
beautiful than anything else. And that started emerging as part of literature to compound definitions of racism in about 1712, 1725. So, it shows up and then starts in the 16th century, but it starts really becoming part of what became racial literature in the first part of the 18th century. And do you know why white marble was prized by Greek and Roman sculptors? Because it was prized. But do you know why it was? It was actually sought for because that made the best surface to paint on. Not because white was the most beautiful and
Oh,
pure. It was because it was the best surface to paint on. If we isn't that interesting? If we look at this archer,
Yeah.
it's white limestone or it's white marble, and sometimes they use limestone too, but they use that because that was the best surface to get all this color on. Yeah, and that's the thing that even if you do, even if your art historian teacher exposes you to the fact that these colors there, that's something to think about. That the white was the ideal surface to paint on. I just thought that was really cool. It's just like painters
Yeah.
today, when you work on paper or canvas or anything like that, you don't want something that has veins of color through it. You want to have a really even surface to work on. So it had nothing to do with race or any assumptions about that later people layered onto it. It had everything to do with being a good canvas for the color that would be applied. And have you heard of Severus Septimius, the founder of London?
I don't think so.
Well, there's busts of him all over England that are 2,000 years old. He was the emperor that founded London. And it wasn't until about 30 years ago when people realized that he was not a white Caucasian. He was born in Libya. His wife came from Syria. His family was Black African family. And what is so amazing about him, his family were able to become not just Roman citizens, but he became a Roman emperor, a Black African Roman emperor. And they discovered that because they found microscopic remnants of the pigment that people had used to paint the busts that were of his that were all over England. I just thought that was really interesting. But and that's one of the reasons why, not that in particular, but this idea that color is important to sculpture is one of the things that we're going to be looking at in this next uh, in this module, color and texture. Um, so as we look at this, we do talk a little bit about the background, and I want you to watch these videos, and it talks about what we just addressed, and they're relatively short videos. And then the background, we talk a lot about artists that deal with just the intrigue of color and texture. One of my favorite artists in this group, one person pointed out, is that it looks like almost all of them use recycled materials. And I thought that's a pretty cool observation. But one of my favorite artists in this is El-Anitsui. El-Anitsui is from Ghana, and what he does is basically collect garbage. He collects old beer cans, of all things, and milk bottle lids and this kind of stuff. And then he discarded metal, which if you've ever raised kids or babysat kids or been a kid yourself, you know how dangerous discarded metal can be. Like you don't want kids in your neighborhood playing around with the pop cans that people sometimes will throw out in the gutter and fields. And what El-Anitsui does is he takes this sharp-edged metal and he trains people to process it into links in these absolutely gorgeous, monumental tapestries, where he transforms the texture of the sharp metal into what looks like a comforting blanket. And it just is astounding, the kind of things that he's able to do. So, and these are the kinds of artists that we look at. Or oh, I'm sorry, I turned away from that before. Um, another artist. If we look at some of these artists like Mark Langan, he uses cardboard, and I think Louise Nevelson used garbage that was cast off from a furniture factory. So they use these kinds of things because these sculptors really focus on the texture and the potential of the texture. I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button as I'm trying to get back to where I'm supposed to be. Okay. So after you take the quiz and the artist review, what we are doing for our project is making using the cardboard box that you have, you're going to be cutting 12 4-inch by 4-inch squares. And this is what we're talking about. Half of these you're going to be applying textures to, half of them you're going to be making color collages. Now, I do realize that some of these are good examples and some of these are bad examples. And the color collage, this whole project, each of these faces you should take about 30 to 45 minutes to do. And um, the collages themselves, you should have each collage should have at least 9 pieces of material that you're making it up with. But I want you to see what kinds of different things people will do with the textures. Like this person added a lot of texture and then spray painted it white. They spray painted this one yellow. People have spray painted it black
Wait,
before.
I can't
Oh,
see the
you haven't seen
examples.
this. Okay, there we go. How's this? Can you see that?
Oh, yeah, I see it now.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. Thank you for saying something.
It's okay.
But this is what we're going to be making, these cubes. And I put both good and bad examples on this. And that's one of the reasons why it's really important to watch these videos so I can point out which is good and bad examples. This kind of thing, this is a bad example of a collage because collages are supposed to have 9 pieces or more. This has 3 right here, this face. The upper face is better because it has a lot of different pieces, and that's just fine. This one is right in between. This is a bad example because the the texture is not really very good. It's just like 8 strands of grass that are kind of attached to the side, not that interesting. But on the top, it's a lot more interesting because a lot more grass is attached to the side for the texture. These textures are really fascinating. This is an excellent example because they've done a lot of work in it. They've made it look really fascinating and interesting. And then they spray painted it all yellow so we can just emphasize it or just focus on the texture. But these color collages are not very successful. They're supposed to have 9 pieces. This one has 3. This one has 4. Not very interesting. But right here on this collage, we do see it's a little bit more interesting on this top side. On the left-hand side, you get a little bit more going on. And so I'm talking a little bit about the principles of that. I want to look at the texture. But if we go through this assignment from top down for the texture part, I want you to take a senses journey where you walk outside and then you walk inside as well. But when you go on your walk, you're going to spend just time focusing your attention on the textures you encounter. If you're walking around the campus building, look specifically at things like wood and the orange peel texture of the wall. What is the carpet doing? Are there interesting textural components of people leaving stuff on a desk that they walked away from? Those kinds of things. I want you to pay attention. If it's in your own apartment, what's the texture of dishes in the sink? What's the texture of clothes left in a corner or clothes hanging up neatly? What does that look like when you have 20 or 30 shirts that are all tightly hanging up in a closet? What kind of thing does that look like? And for the color part, what you're going to do is I just have like 5 different color wheel sites that you can go to, and all of them should be free. And if we click on one and go to it, the color wheel, it's a free online color wheel. And this is the kind of process I wanted you to go through. Find this color wheel. If it's not working, let me know. But this talks about color mixing, different things like that. But what we're trying to get to is you guys know enough color theory that you know there's different color combinations, color schemes. So one of them is complementary. And that's when you look at things from opposite sides of the color wheel. Tertiary is when you're dealing with the 3 different extremes of the color wheel. Split complementary is it when you look at one side of the color wheel, you go to the opposite side, and then you use colors that are on either side of that opposite side. And this one is a good website to show you what those relationships look like. Here's the primary, where you have those 3 different colors. A triad is where you use those three different colors to kind of, you pick a principal color and then you use colors that are at the opposite extremes of the color wheel. A square or a tetrad is four different colors that are in opposite, four the farthest away corners. And then, well, they're calling that a square right here and then a tetrad right here when it becomes a rectangle. And both of those are fine, but you're using four different colors. That's another kind of color scheme. Analogous means that they're close together on the color wheel. Complementary, like I said, a split complementary, they're not showing that, but that's when you start with one color and you look at the opposite side, and instead of using that color, you use this color on either edge of it. And um, this one I'm not really super happy with because it doesn't do what we want other than talk about the color schemes. So I want to go back and show you. So I may get rid of that one, but I want to look at this color wheel and show you something that I think is really interesting. And you guys may not need this. You may have your own fun one that you like to use. But as we go down and look at these, this gives you some more information about it. But there should be a part in it where you're able to stick in a color and it tells you, okay, I may have to get rid of that one too. That is not making me very happy. But if we go to the PixArt one, this is the kind of thing I was hoping for. If we go to the PixArt, what we can do, and I really like this, and again, you might have a better one that you can find, is right here we can pick color schemes or any whatever color scheme we want to use. We can pick one, and then this free computer program will give us different options. We can move this little guy anywhere we want, and it will give us kind of a range of color under that monochromatic color combination or color scheme. So I'm going to green. It shows me the different kinds of greens. If I want to use a different, I can go to analogous, and now it will show me different things on either side of it, where it's more than just monochromatic. You get a little bit broader range. Complementary, it shows me what's on the opposite side. You know, I have a base color of this kind of rust. It shows me that turquoise is going to be the complement. We have triadic, where they're evenly spaced. And then we also have the tetradic. Again, evenly spaced, but this time there's four different colors. And what you're going to be doing for the six color tiles that you make is you're going to pick three color schemes or three color combinations, complementary, monochromatic, and triadic, for example. And you're going to do two sets of color for each of those three. So if we pick complementary, maybe the first one is going to be kind of this burnt orange, and then you have this kind of earth tone turquoise. Okay, so that's going to be the two principal colors that I use for one of my color collages. Maybe another one, I'm going to pick kind of a yellow green, and then the opposite side is this almost indigo. And that's going to be the colors that I use in my second complementary color collage. And maybe another one is, let's do analogous. Or maybe I don't want to do this. Maybe I want to do achromatic, no color at all. So I'm just going to do shades of gray. And that's fine. You can do that. That would be good to do. Maybe I'll do a monochromatic on reds, and the other side will be achromatic, which is just shades of gray. And that'd be just fine. You know, that'd be a great one too. And maybe my last one is going to be triadic, where one of the colors is kind of this burnt orange, and we have almost indigo, and we have this interesting leaf green. And then maybe another one is going to be more, maybe a more of a yellow kind of thing. I'm having a hard time finding yellow in that, but do you see what kind of thing we're going for with this? Where we're just playing around with the color things and we're basically coming up with 6 different sets of colors to use to make these collages out of. And on this one, you can see that they used a split complementary where they had orange and then 2 shades of blue. On this one, it's analogous where you have orange and then you have red and yellow on either side of it. And on this one, on the top, it's strict complementary where we have basically just orange and dark blue, and that's it. This one I think is a little bit more interesting. This they've used magazines. This one, it looks like they have almost an interesting triad where they have maybe a pink and a turquoise and a light green. It's a very interesting color combo. And here it's this one is almost monochromatic where it's different shades of red. We have pink and then dark red and then a red that's a little bit lighter than the dark red. And here on the right-hand side, we have green and purple, which are almost, with a little bit of yellow. So this maybe is a split complementary kind of thing. But each of the 6 squares you're going to be using a different one of 3 different color schemes that you work out, and then you're going to use for each of those 3 color schemes, you're going to use 2 different sets of colors. Does that make sense, Anna, for the color?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. And then if we circle back to the texture, look at what's going on. Each of these should take about 45 minutes to make. And, this was in the days when we were meeting in the classroom and I wanted to spend 2 weeks on this kind of thing and just had people make these huge texture collages. But we wanted to cover a lot more ground and do different other things. So that's why we kind of moved away from this. But look at these kinds of textures, and this is just using cardboard. This person, they did a weaving. This almost looks like cereal box cardboard. They've done folding so that the texture becomes the edge that we see, and the folds are to the either side. This one, they've kind of got, it looks like to me that they kind of got it wet and then formed it and then let it dry, and that makes a really interesting texture. This one, it looks like they have several strips of cardboard that were pretty long, and they cut it very thinly and curled it just a little bit, so it almost looks like fur. This one, it looks almost like they did different layers of glue and then glued sand to it, which I think is fascinating. And then on this one, these can be really interesting where they took the cardboard and cut into it to make the texture pop out with the shadows. And one thing that I've seen that was really interesting is somebody just took thin cardboard, like from a cereal box, and they used this as their inspiration, and they cut out these complicated designs from several of these 4-inch by 4-inch squares that they cut from the cereal box, and then they laid them on top of each other, and it had developed a really fascinating texture. But remember, these are supposed to be about 30 minutes to 45 minutes a piece, so just gluing leaves on it isn't going to do it. But something like this, notice how they glued weeds on it from different directions and made this really fascinating texture. Or right here, doing something, I don't even know what that originally was. Maybe this was a Brillo pad that they used and they experimented with and sifted out and just saw what paint did to it. And this face right here that's facing us, I don't know what that original texture is, but by spray painting it with yellow repeatedly, they start developing a completely new texture with the paint globules collecting on it. I think that there's just some really fascinating ones. What I don't want to see though is this one is just one side aluminum foil covering it the side, and here it's sandpaper covering the side. If you're going to use sandpaper, tear it into strips and then overlap the strips and make the strips maybe 3/8 of an inch wide. So we see a really interesting overlapping where you get the kind of the fuzzy paper and then the sand covering it, fuzzy paper and the sand covering. That could be really interesting. Or if you're going to use foil, maybe before you put the foil down, glue string on it. Let the string dry. And then when you put the foil down, put a little bit of glue down first and burnish the foil so that the foil brings out all the texture of the string. That would be fascinating. Now this, it seems like a pretty simple texture, the one on the right side of this cube. But if you look at it closely, you see it's actually metal pinheads that the person put in a grid shape. And so the texture is actually all, hundreds of pinheads. I think there's maybe 140, 200 or so pinheads that they just put in, and that's the texture. That's really fascinating. These other two, not so much. Now, I have had people do this where they turn in something like this. So I give them points for this face, but not for this one because there's only 3 pieces of material. And on this one, they only glued 3 leaves down, and that's not really going to count as a texture. If you want to use leaves as your texture, what people have done that is really fascinating is they've collected a whole bunch of leaves, split them down that central spine, and then glued them on overlapping so that it starts looking almost like lizard scales, if you can imagine that. And that it just becomes really fascinating. So think through the kinds of textures you want to do and think, use this as inspiration and think through the colors you want to do and make color collages. And I give some directions about that. This should take about 9 to 10 hours to do this, which works out, since you have 12 of these, it works out to about 45 minutes a face. And that is important because if you do this in 10 minutes, it's not going to mean anything. But if you do it in 10 minutes, look at it, come back to it, spend another 10 minutes on it, then come back later, add to it even more. And by the time you get to that half an hour, 45-minute mark, you're going to have something that is just richly layered and is going to look really fascinating. And after you make 6 tiles with the color collage and 6 tiles with your textures, then you're going to glue them together and make these 2 cubes. And I want you to look at how these are photographed. They're photographed where we see 3 sides, and the color cube is on one side, texture cube is on the other, and then the person has moved the cube around, so it's the same photo, but we see 3 completely different sides. And that's how I want you to photograph these. So color cube, texture cube. Does this make sense, Anna?
Yeah, it does.
All right, excellent. And of course, we're going to talk about more about it next week as well. But and I'm going to be finishing grading all the carvings and stuff like that that people have done. But I want people to start working on these because your final project, you're going to take the carving that you've made. Um, in a week and a half, you're going to cover it with paper mache and sand it down so it's smooth. And then at the end of the term, you're going to apply everything that you've learned about color and texture and apply that to the biomorphic carving. If you have remnants from your house, from the wire piece, from the other things, you can add that to your sculpture as well. And I've had people where they've combined every project they made into that final uh, uh, foam carving and attach different things, reuse pieces, stuff like that, and it ends up being really fantastical. But I'm sorry, Anna, I was talking and I just got away I did not realize that we've gone over. So I really appreciate your patience, and I guess I was just excited to hear my own voice.
It's okay.
But do you have any questions before we end?
Do those cubes need to be finished by the end of this week?
No, no. We're going to talk about them again on Wednesday. If you can get them done this weekend, that's great. But I've extended it a week
Mhm.
because I want you guys to have time on it. but we will look at whatever people turn in this Sunday. We will look at that. And the very next thing that we're going to start talking about is the paper mache.
Oh, okay.
All right.
I think that's it. Thanks.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for your patience. Again, I'm sorry I went over. I did not mean to. But I look forward, if anybody is going to show up Saturday afternoon, that'd be great to see you there. And I look forward to seeing everybody on Wednesday.
Yeah, I'll try coming on Saturday. I'll see if that
Oh,
works out.
excellent. And
And
hopefully next Wednesday, let me know what the museum told you
mhm.
when you call them. All right. Hey, thank you, Anna. And everybody else who's watching this, thank you. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah, see ya.